My first question relates to divergence. People have been talking about divergence between the agencies for a long time. We've now got research agencies. They're doing nice papers. One's called Aggregate Confusion, Divergence in the ESG Rating Agencies, and others called ESG Raters, all over the map. The correlation between research providers is low in this sector, 0.6. In the credit rating agency, it's 0.99. Does any of this matter? Should people just move on and accept that agencies are different, or is there something that agencies could do to have more impact? Margarita.
Thank you, Raj. Good afternoon, everyone. So rating agencies produce divergent ratings, and I think that's okay, because they provide assessments of ESG performance, and each rating agency has their own philosophy, vision, methodologies, which are usually very transparent to their clients, and therefore they provide a unique and subjective view on what is the performance on various ESG issues. So I think it's okay to have divergent ratings, and it's perfectly normal, because the clients of ESG rating agencies would be interested in different things. Therefore, the assessment of those ESG issues will differ. However, it is not okay if ESG rating agencies provide different estimates of the raw data that underpins the analysis of ESG performance. And this is where I think we have a problem, because we don't have yet, after all those years of quoting ESG data as the main barrier to the takeoff of sustainable investment, we still don't have standardized, mandatory ESG data in ESG disclosure from companies. And until we get that investment grade data that can be trusted, that is based on the same methodologies and the same metrics, that is comparable across portfolios, industries, and markets, we will have doubts about whether the assessments made by ESG rating agencies are trustworthy. And I think this is a problem both for the rating agencies themselves, who also provide bouts of raw data, but also for investors who don't know if they can really trust this source. And ESG data is really at the foundation of sustainable investment, and we need to have the same standardized metrics that will be the baseline for ESG integration, on which ESG rating agencies can provide their take on things that matter and things that don't matter that much.
So to understand you correctly, you're saying accept the fact that one agency will classify News Corp as AAA, positive, and another will say it's a really bad company because it's captured the politics of climate change. Accept that reality, get that disclosed, but get standardized data into the system which is comparable.
Yes, absolutely. As long as we cannot compare water withdrawal across portfolios simply because companies choose to disclose water use, water consumption, something else. So right. Therefore, we cannot know the absolute ESG performance, which is the basic, but on which ESG rating agencies build, based on their individual models, their assessments.
Antti or Richard, how can we get standardization into the system given that regulators don't want to really push that?
Yeah, I think maybe to add to that, the kind of a point that there's even though we are all in the same church preaching the same choir about the importance of the sustainable, green, ethical, ESG finance, there's still kind of a little bit different motives usually underlying different investors who take responsible investment seriously. So it's completely understandable that, let's say, if your motivation is to kind of invest according to your values, that you would look the ESG data sets a little bit differently. Similarly, if you're only looking to improve your risk return ratios, then you would look ESG data on a little bit different light. And I think one of the confusions and one of the reasons why the kind of different scores don't correlate is very simply they are trying to answer a very, very different question. So, I mean, it depends. There's a bit of a buyer beware when it comes to users of the ESG data to kind of figure out that what is it exactly that I'm trying to establish in my portfolio before one jumps into kind of figuring out that what's the exact data set or exact scoring mechanism that I can use to achieve that. But in order to, I fully agree with Margarita. I think we do need some kind of a standardized data sets, and there's plenty of different kinds of frameworks, GRIs, SASBs of this world that give guidance to the companies. I don't think it's a particularly, I mean, there's a certain amount of complexity over there, but the underlying data sets that the companies do, be it CO2 emissions, be it the board composition, be it the products they do, be it where in the world they operate, it's not necessarily that complicated. But there's some kind of a regulatory push usually helps to kind of get the lowest, the least capable of kind of getting up to board. Maybe a kind of and a larger mass of those. Whereas I suppose kind of leading companies would need then more guidance and more explicit guidance from investors to kind of to be more explicit in their reporting. I think there's a mix of that.
Thank you, Richard. You've been involved with the European process to get that regulatory push. What's your experience? Are regulators willing to create a minimum floor for reporting? And if not, what can we do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult. I was part of the high-level expert group that we provided recommendations to the European Commission, which has led to their Sustainable Finance Action Plan. Which is actually encompasses a raft of regulatory changes, one of which is around disclosure, particularly for the financial industry, which is very welcome. The challenge is, if you want new sustainable benchmarks, if you want your pension scheme to default to a 2-degree compliant benchmark, you actually need really good data coming from the companies. So you need data that is science-based, you need data that is comparable, preferably audited. And we analyze 16,000 companies all over the world every year. We've done that for many years now. And we provide that data to asset owners, to asset managers, banks. And it's difficult, even today, even with some regulatory push, to get consistency in that reporting across the world. One of the reasons is companies, we engage every single company actually, and we verify our information with those companies directly. Companies have different accounting methods for CO2 emissions versus their financial accounts. Some will use a control method of accounting for CO2 emissions and the other methods for their financial accounting. So you have apples to oranges comparisons straight away. Some will exclude certain aspects of their operations. They might report extremely well on Japan, but very poorly on China. And actually, some of the reasons are because companies find it hard to get this information too. The majority of impacts for many companies across many sectors actually is in their supply chain, and they still struggle very much to gather that information from their supply chain. So what we need really is consistent regulations, which are lacking actually, which are not necessarily voluntary, but they are standardized, and there is a standardized ask of every company in the world to provide some basic information. Because if you don't have that, you don't get flow of information along supply chains about products landing into the hands of people who are making decisions about investment. You could argue that's ticking the box, that's too boilerplate, let's leave it up to the companies to disclose what is material, what is relevant to them. But David Pitt-Watson's speech earlier indicated that, since 2006, it has actually been the responsibility of companies in the UK to report on material environmental issues. It's been the same across Europe, actually, as part of the Accounts Modernization Directive for 6,000 companies. And yet we have still not seen an increasing level of sophisticated reporting on climate change until major pushes like the TCFD has recently been pushing. So I think we're a long way away, and I think regulators actually need to heighten their ambition a little in terms of pushing for disclosure.